So my name is Dr. Warren. Ugh, did I say doctor? I really like.
You don't have to
No?
say doctor.
Yeah, it's like okay. My name is Warren Clarke. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Manitoba. My area of research is in culture anthropology and sociology. I focus on Black Canadian studies, Black masculinities, neoliberalism, post-colonialism, decolonization, colonization, youth cultures, and the list goes on and on. Thanks for asking the question about this first book of mine. So the book is
Congratulations.
appreciate that. Thank you. So the book is looking at marginalized young Black men in Ontario and Quebec and how they navigate youth employment training programs.
Mm-hmm.
But most importantly, how these youth employment training programs responds to their race, their gender, and class, social class, in ways in which how they can help seek employment or jobs for them in white settler colonized nation state called Canada, right? The work, key findings of the work was that, when we talk about Black young men and anything to do with Black youth, we homogenize their lived experiences and what it means to be Black male in youth specifically. Scholars like Carl James, for example, he's done amazing work for many years in talking about Black young men, particularly in the education system in Ontario, Toronto, GTA, Greater Toronto Area specifically. And I use his work and his ideas encourage me and encourage his book to think about what it means to be Black and male differently. I think when you talk about social class, which is a huge indicator of the differences of being Black and male, is illuminating, especially when it came out of the research. I'm Black, I identify as male, and the one thing when I was interviewing a lot of those young men is I identified my privilege, right? As much as at that time I was nearing the end of my graduate program at Carleton University, I was running a non-for-profit organization, or started that non-for-profit organization called the Afro-Caribbean Mentorship Program. And I was engaged in conversations with directors and senior leaders at Royal Bank and having these meetings literally almost every day once a week, I wouldn't say every day, but at least once a week during that time. And it dawned on me, I was like, I'm sitting with these young Black men. There's no way that these men who I'm speaking with respectfully can engage or access, those spaces that I can access, right? Let alone, think about my education, right? I'm on the verge of completing a doctorate, and many of these young men, some of them didn't even have high school, right? Education. So, when I looked at when I thought about that, and I was thinking about my privilege, how dare I not use intersectionality as a framework to actually start thinking about what it really means to be Black, male, and youth, and marginalized, right? That spurs different sets of social oppressions. So you can't paint everybody with one brush. It's impossible, right? We have to be attentive in doing this work with humanity. As my mentor said for many years when he was on this earth, we have to learn people's stories, right? And if we understand and we take the intentionality to learning people's stories, then we understand the nuances and the beauty of people and humanity, right? But I can't look at people, for me, respectfully, and say, "Oh, white woman," and think I know everything about a white woman. That's wrong. It's impossible, right? I don't know what you go through in a day-to-day life, or a white man for that matter, right? There's so many entry points that makes your characteristics, your humanity unique, right? And the only way I find that out if I ask a question without assuming. So that was, long way of saying that. That's what the book is about. Right, and I think it really challenges our ideas of how we think about Blackness in this country. I'm working with some amazing graduate students right now, and they are two of them specifically are from Nigeria, and they are entering the ideas of Black masculinity in their work. And the one idea that they're writing about is this idea of becoming Black, which also comes from they're using Professor George Safadeh, who's at U of T, in his work and his ideas of talking about becoming Black. And I think that's a really good entry point to again, talk about the complexities of what it means to be Black, right? Like a lot of folks in here in Winnipeg, they use this idea of BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color. But what it really means is everyone who's not white.
Yeah.
That's all it means, right? And these are settler colonial discourses or language that we use to liberate people who are not white by homogenizing, right? What was that before? People of color. Before that, visible minorities, right? Even here, last 2 years, I think it was a scholar or community activist here at U of M, I can't remember their title, they came up with a new one, BIPOC. Like, the term changes, but it still remains the same. All it means is people who are not white, right? And what they define BIPOC as, Black Indigenous bodies of color. So it really begs the question in terms of scholarship in Black masculinity studies, is whose tools are we using to start to appreciate the stories or lived experiences of Black folk in this country, right? Like, we have to take a little bit of consideration of humanity and intersectionality that will go along, that tied hand in hand with what it means to be human. But back to the book really centers on, a colonial social discourse, right? And using scholars like Sunera Thubani, Frantz Fanon, who's a Pan-Africanist psychologist. A lot of people don't even know that, but he's also a phenomenologist. And what phenomenology is the study of human experiences. It also ties into Pierre Bourdieu's ideas of doxa and habitus and how we understand the social world around us. And these ideas really cultivate and really start to think through what it means to be Black in Canada, right? But centering down what it means to be Black in Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa, where the research was extracting data. The good thing about the research, it didn't just, from a data perspective, and it was a lot of work, as I remember, it not only extracted data from the young men in those 3 cities, but it was the youth counselors or the youth employment training program officers, the employers who work with these youth employment training programs, and reluctantly I was able to extract data from funders. So these were the officers from either a municipal level or a private organization that was funding these programs, right? And just getting their sense and their understanding of how do they respond to Black masculinity, class, right, in these programs, right? And how do they recognize that anti-Black racism doesn't stop because we say it stops? That's not how it works. It's a social discourse, which is embedded in the settler colonial ideas of what it means to be Canadian. So it was really telling and understanding the patterns of similarities, differences, and how people really understand the work that they're doing, from the employers, from the youth counselors and the funders, but most importantly, how these young men envision themselves within these spaces, right? Like, even though that they may, there are a couple of the young men who I spoke to in that book or in the research, they would say, this is a program, I see it's helping me, but it doesn't stop the oppressions I'm feeling outside the doors of this program. Or when I go in and I'm interviewed by an employer, the employer is still, I'm still in mind of, in their ways of communicating with them, of showing microaggressions or even moments of anti-Blackness. There's moments where the counselors would say, enough with these street guys, I don't want them anymore, right? But not pointing directly to saying these black guys from the hood or anything, right? Like, it was, and one thing I'll share too, what was really sad about the work is that, even though that, there was great moments communicating with these young men, particularly this one young man in Ottawa, we had an amazing conversation, and at the end of the interview, he left and he came back maybe 20 minutes after, and I was there speaking with one of the youth employment program officers, or counselors, and he came back with handcuffs on his wrist and two officers right on either side of him, right? And the officer looked at me and they're like, "Well, he says that he was with you. Is this true?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course. Yeah, he was literally right, with me like 20 minutes ago." And they uncuffed him and let him go, right? And part reason why it was I wasn't there to see the arrest, but what I was told was he went to the washroom. Someone else was making noise in the washroom, and the police showed up and arrested him. Right. So again, it shows you, right, like these young men, even though that they're in spaces of positivity to help them find employment, they're still stained with not only anti-blackness but classism.
Yes.
Right, and they're stained with the gender biases of what it means to be young, black, and male, right? So it's not just so simple just to say all black male are this, right? Because, I, go to the public washroom when I need to, and, I've never ran into those concerns, right? Like, you can't just say all black men are viewed this way, or all black women, or all white women, or all white men, or whoever, right? So we have to take into account of those intersections. So essentially, that's what the book really encourages us to really think about. I see it, and I don't think any faculty member intentionally tries to do harm. I don't think that's. I don't definitely don't think that. I just think sometimes, like when you're presented and you've normalized your way of thinking for so long, it's very hard to break out of that thinking, right? And using the work of Fanon, he calls that cognitive dissonance, right? Like when you're provided new information and it counteracts the information you already have, it's hard for you to really wrap your head around it, right? So, I definitely see it. I don't think it's, I think the university. I'll say this, and this is not me just saying it to, get kudos or anything. I do think the university, in many rights, is trying to change that and try to make it more inclusive. But I think there's still more work to do, right? Especially here in Winnipeg. I'll start off by saying I'm not from Winnipeg or Manitoba, and I don't mean that as a slight to anybody. But when I got here in 2021, I experienced culture shock, and I say that as a opportunity to speak to that, and not to be like, oh my god, I was depressed. That's not how it was. The one thing that stood out to me, well, first off, I'll say this: the one thing that stood out to me when I first landed in Winnipeg and my colleague picked me up was that there was deer running around, and I was like, "What? That's not a thing you see in Ontario like that." So there's some humor there. No, but to be very transparent and I guess a little bit serious here, the first week here I was in search of like the black community, like where do black folk dwell in the city, or gather? Sorry, not dwell is the wrong word. Gather in the city. Like when I was in Toronto, you can go places like Malvern, and there's a black community, right? Not this.
Jane and Finch, I remember.
Jane and Finch is one of those areas. Even Eglinton West. Not so much now because of the gentrification that's happened in that area. But there's pockets you can go in different areas of the city, right? Here, there's nothing, right? When I was asking folks, and one of my colleagues, where do black people like gather here? Like, what's the deal here? And one person said Dino's. I was like, Dino's, a grocery store, right? Like that's why I found out it was a grocery store. And there was no real like black folk, gatherings like you would see in Toronto. Montreal has a few pockets, well, actually a lot of pockets in LaSalle and NDG and those areas. A little Burgundy, right? Like you can see black folk, right? It's not that you don't see black folk here. It's just like everyone's just like tunnel vision doing their thing. Many of them, right? Like I'm in the store and I'm out, right? Versus like in Toronto, you say, I'll use some Toronto slang as I'm talking. You see the Rastaman say, Brethren, what's going on, right? And you may not know them, but you can share a couple words and keep it moving, right? Here's not like that, right? I think there's different black experiences as you mentioned, newcomer, but you also have, when you say newcomer, you're also saying Nigerian. You're also saying people from Rwanda, people from parts of West Africa, South Africa, right? Like there's different people coming into the country who then some don't have family, some are trying to find family, and especially with the large Nigerian group here, I've noticed that they stick together, right? Which is not a bad thing. The other thing too is you have your Caribbean black folk here who've been here for years, many folks. So some of them will tie to like the Barbados Association or the Jamaica Association here. So like they're segregated that way. So you're not seeing one big black group of folk. You're seeing like, okay, the Jamaican Association over here, Nigerian Association over here, Barbados over there, right? Like, so they're here, but they're in pockets and they're small. We're not really having this conversation at most times, right? Like if we're having a conversation about black experience, it's during February. It's just what it is, right? Like I think organizations like the Black History Manitoba, who you'll see do projects or programming for the community throughout the year, to put also the Afro-Caribbean Mentorship Program, which I'm very humbled to be founder of that program and then bring it here to Winnipeg. Like we offer programs throughout the year, right? Like the barbershop talk, the salon talk, the anti-black racism as a mental health concern event, right? The movie screening of different black film, which we screen for community, and all these things are free for community, right? But the thing is, there's not a lot of attention because a lot of people are just not in the know, right? And people are used to like, okay, I'll just go during Black History Month, or, I know that we're doing the Emancipation Day in June, but I'll just wait till February, like because there's no push to that, right? And using an example as to how there's attention on black bodies differently here, which doesn't celebrate black experiences as every day or as not to be celebrated more than another group. Since I would say maybe early fall, there is a billboard, two billboards actually, of a black young man who's wanted for murder. Two big billboards just sitting there, standing or on one of the buildings there, right? Now, let's acknowledge that I'm not condoning murder. So let's get that out of the way. But the representation of a young black man on that billboard, also in the minds of many people of how we have thought and theorized and thinking about black men that as a homogenous group, also centers that that could be any black man. Right, I have a young black son who's 17 years old. He just turned 17 this week. I should know that. All right, took him out for his birthday. So I don't know. And he has dreads. He's starting to grow his hair out. And the picture of the young man on that billboard also has dreads the same size length as my son. Right? How easy is it for someone like, oh, you kind of similar to that guy on that billboard, right? Now those comments have never been said to my son, but it has been sent to some young black men here already, right? And this has come out during one of the barbershop talk events we had just in January, right? So again, like when we think about black experiences, it's still tied to historical ideas of demonizing the bodies of black folk, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't look for this person. If he committed murder, yes, he needs to face the consequences. That's just what it is, any human being. But do we have to have that for a series of months? There was a student here at the U of M was murdered by police, Afolabi Stephen Opaso, Ziggy, and there's no remembrance, recognition, appreciation for his humanity. Shot by police and killed for a mental health call. So when we think about what it means to be black in Winnipeg, there are certain things that are glorified and there's certain things that are not when it comes to black experiences, particularly when it comes to masculinity. So to answer your question again, or finalize my response to your question, I think there's a lot of groups that are doing good work. I think there's a lot of people that are comfortable here in the black community, but as a critique, I think there should be, and there's opportunity to be in more of solidarity, which we are missing that I don't believe that we need another non-for-profit organization. I think Black folk who are running non-for-profit organizations here have the opportunity to work in solidarity with one another, but also allow young people to lead and help them lead. We are missing that in Black communities. And this is not me being the whistleblower, right? This is me speaking a truth that it could be lent to any group, right? What is the problem with saying, hey, you know what? You may have a good idea. Let's see where we land, right? But if you're open to feedback and helping you lead, or helping me lead you and you leading me and we leading each other, there's could be better outcomes, right? If we say we're going to service the Black community or community, doesn't mean one person's over the other. We're working together. That's what it's supposed to be. I think we have to be mindful with youth-led, Black youth-led organizations, right? Like, I wrote a piece on Black youth activism recently, a chapter, and for a book. And one of my arguments in that book is that we're expecting or asking Black youth to do the heavy lift, Black young people, to do the heavy lifting to liberate, and they're still young, learning to be human, learning to be an adult, learning even if some of these young people are studying, right? And we're asking these young people to then lift the torch when they have opportunity to be more guided and also not taking on that strain, that stress. We're introducing them to the concept of John Henryism at an early age. And what John Henryism is this want as a racialized person. It doesn't stem to Black experience. The theory doesn't tie to Black folk only. It comes out in America. But saying that you're asking this racialized person to do more work in whatever area of liberating themselves or community, but that more work is also bringing more stress, right? You know, like there's only 24 hours in a day, right? Like you can't expect anybody to work 24 hours straight, maybe some people. But right? But what we're doing is we're burning out people. We're burning out young people, right? I think, you know, when you think about what it means to be young, it also means to enjoy your youth, right? I think broadly when it comes to young people, I think young people are really experience a tough time to even experience what being a young person is. When you look like provinces like Ontario, and yes, I'm going to be very critical about the premier there, and I'll say it for the record. When you ask young people to say, hey, you know, if you want to get into basket weaving courses and there's no basket weaving jobs, you may want to look for another career like into STEM. Well, let me ask you this. Have you seen the movie Hook? Peter Pan?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a great movie, isn't it?
Love it.
Right? Well, what was the main purpose of what was the main point of the movie, if you remember? Don't forget where you came from.
Yeah.
Essentially. There's many teachings out of the movie, but Peter Pan grew up. And then he grew up, he forgot. He became this business-minded person, and he forgot who he was. Until Tink came back for him, and then brought him back to Neverland, and he was like, oh yeah, I remember right? You're asking these young people to forget being young at a young age, right? And you're asking these young people not to be curious, not to be creative. How do you look at a young person and say, you know what? I know you want to be an artist. I know, you know, this is your joy, your passion. But guess what? There's no jobs here for you. No. You're going to have to get into STEM. What are we expecting this person to do when they get into a STEM class and they don't have no passion to do it? How are they going to excel? They're going to fail, many of them, right? Now, it's not to say that, you know, we shouldn't be paying attention to the types of jobs in the job sector, in our careers. But I think it's a very, very hard conversation to just have with folks, or not even conversation, to tell folks. There was no conversation about it, right? It's like, hey, don't follow your dreams. You know, that's like, how do you tell your young person who's like, especially in a province like Ontario, like, hey, I know you want to get into be an artist, but you're gonna have to do STEM, right?
That's why we need minimum salary for artists, I think.
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. But when you have a leadership team who sees it differently, then it's hard to actually go after what you want, right? And then, what's going on with OSAP in Ontario, I think is another point to say, your dreams are going to be tarnished.
What's happening with the student loan system?
They have reformalized it, where there's less grants and increase the amount of loans. You're going to pay back more in the long run. The short answer. So I think I want to be respectfully that we're not in Ontario. We're in Manitoba, and there was. I think they're capping at an increase of a maximum of 4% for institutions to raise their tuition here in Manitoba. I think that's something, but everything right now is going up. Cost of living is high. It's, if I point to the States as an example, I think there's a lot of programs that are being cut. A lot of professors are losing jobs, right? Like, who knows what will happen in the future here in Canada when it comes to higher learning, right? Dare I get into AI? I think that's another inroad that really stifles someone's curiosity, because you're asking a machine, or respectfully, or software to do the thinking for you, right? So there's so many ebbs and flows to the conversation when it comes to young people broadly in education. I can only speak from my perspective, right? Like, I applied for the funding with Research Manitoba, and I received it, as we all know, right? And very humbled, appreciated for the opportunity, and help to mobilize my ideas and get a research that's really has been on my head for some time to start it, right? And also motivate me to do research in Manitoba, which I never thought I'd ever do in a million years, because I never thought I would even come here. No slight to Manitoba or Winnipeg. I didn't think, my professorship would have been here. I thought I was going to be Ontario for life in terms of research funding. I think that with my work, and I did a little bit of digging to see, okay, past recipients of this award, like how many were applying for like anything in Black studies? Very few. So I was quite surprised. I was happy that I got the award, but I was quite surprised that, how do I put this? I got the award. You know what I mean? Like, I've heard that many people who are doing somewhat similar area work as mine who applied were denied, right? So I think it shows that the reviewers, maybe the folks have changed, or they're are more open, or policies have changed. I think, and I also think the people who are the reviewers, and Wilfrid Laurier Press is an example. They're very forthcoming in saying that they're wanting to get more into Black studies, right? And I think that's an opportunity that they're turning into a strength, right? And if I'm a betting man, maybe that's what Research Manitoba is doing as well, right? Is saying, okay, listen, like we haven't really explored social sciences, we haven't really done anything in Black culture or Black experiences. Hey, this is something that's interesting, makes sense. Let's see where we go. So very fortunate that I was able to retain the award. So just for the record, I looked at secondary and post-secondary students in formal education, and how they're receiving mentorship, how they're receiving support in their journeys of learning in these spaces, and the Afro-Caribbean Mentorship Program, using that as the organization in terms of understanding how a mentorship program that works with the university actually helps with the learning of these the students, right? So really good. Was able to extract data from, I think I'm over 40 interviews easy. Did one-on-one interviews, participant observations, focus groups, survey. So a lot of data came out of the work. I will say for certain, without being too much chatty about it, because I'm still doing data analysis, is that a lot of these young folk, Black folk, really goes back to the earlier conversation. Are they're not in sync in terms of what Blackness really is, right? And it's like there's a sense that they're being pushed into this understanding of what blackness means in the city, and it's usually tied to this BIPOC thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this identity, who are these people, and if there is no understanding of identity, then what type of support do you need to facilitate your learning if you're struggling with identity, right? So it's been really good to see. I think the other thing too that's coming out of the study, I'll say for certain, is that there's an opportunity from these students' lived experience and what they've shared is that there's an opportunity to really encourage the formal institutions to be paying attention to these type of opportunities, either through courses or book clubs. So, for example, here at the University of Manitoba, there is no Black Studies program, right? And a lot of students, international students, come from places like West Africa, right? So they understand Blackness differently there, and then they come here, and then they have to become Black on their own based on their lived experience and the environment in which they live. But if there was a course or if there was a program which could help facilitate that learning, then they're finding identity, finding themselves, finding a sense of belonging, not somewhat identity, but also being supported and understanding what it means to be Black. So the work is foundational. I think it really helps to center future work and doing away with this BIPOC thing and homogenizing Black folk, and also is keeping us accountable, even me, right? To say like, hey, there's other groups here that we need to be paying attention to. So really happy with this work on what I was able to find. The joy for research is always going to be a passion of mine. I'm going to be passionate about what I do. The one thing I know you didn't ask the things I don't like, but I think it goes hand in hand. Is the speed in which that the completed study gets to public, right? Hence the reason like moments like this what we're having is super important, because even in terms of me doing the data analysis, I can talk to you about some themes, right? And people are like, oh, that's what's coming out of the research? Oh, geez, right? But in terms of the research itself, it's like it really encourages me to learn people's stories, right? And I fell into anthropology, culture anthropology, because of that, right? I fell into culture anthropology because of my then mentor who passed away, Jim Hayers Sr., who really pushed me to understand people's stories. Everyone has a story, and I honor him. I honor the work he's done, and it's really helped me to actually see the joy and the appreciation of the work. Even sometimes you're behind the desk and you're like, oh my God, this is so long. My goodness, I got to write another grant to do this, and like. But when you get in front of somebody and you get to speak with them and they trust you and you're able to write their story and use different theories and ideas to help make sense of their lived experiences, it brings me joy, right? And I wish I didn't have to do all the other things, but yeah, I'm really happy of what I do. I love what I do. One specific research project that I'm really passionate about stems out of my the book, actually. Pointing at black screen, I don't know why.
There was a book out there.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was very curious about is how social capital is attained in the areas of employment, education, well-being for these marginalized young people, right? There is, segue a bit, there is a movement, I will say, in Toronto, Ontario, called Missing Black Boys. Mm-hmm. And I am going to go on record and say that we need to be doing a bit more deep digging before we just say these young people are missing. I'm not saying to water down the conversation of what missing means. I think we need to dig as to why these young black boys specifically are going missing. Now, there was a W5 report that had this, they did a study of some sort that discussed that all these young boys are going out of town, or the acronym OT. And what that means is they're going into suburban spaces, particularly in Ontario, like Sudbury and Hamilton, all these places, and then they are selling drugs, right? They're going to trap houses, and and they're selling drugs in these areas where drugs are highly more accessible for those who want them in those areas. I'm not saying they're not accessible in Toronto, and they're making profit. Now we got to think about a lot of these young men, where they're coming from. Yes, many of them are coming from marginalized areas. However, there is a difference between a house and a home. Love. A house, 4 walls and a roof. Oh, come in whenever you want. There's food there if you want it. There's no food there. I won't be here for 2 weeks. See you. And if you have a lot of these young men who are raised in houses, how are they being raised? Who's looking after them? Even if that they are going into their neighborhoods and tying themselves to black men, other black young men or men, and that's encouraging them to go OT, they are among the blind with the blind, where they're being led by the blind, meaning, metaphorically, that these are also young men who have been raised in houses. And then they're finding solidarity within this friend group, which is encouraging them to go outside and make some money.
So this is tied to your studies on masculinity
Exactly.
as well, right?
Because then their masculinity is performance, which then becomes performative. Performance is conscious. I understand how to act. For instance, consciously, I'm a man, I'm going to sport the beard because I'm performing the role. And this comes out of Judith Butler's work, right? And then there's performativity. It's unconscious. It's based on repetitive acts. That you're just doing what it means to be a man because you've been doing it, right? So we're not taking a good look on how these young men are being socialized, right? How the social capital that they're attaining in these areas, and what type of social capital. Because social capital doesn't lend itself to be bad or good. Social capital could be the art of selling drugs, understand financial literacy, but it's based on the network you're in, the group of people to help encourage you and give you the capital in that area of whatever education it's tied to. So back to the study. So the study, what I'm proposing to do is how do the parents, how do the community activists, how do the teachers contribute to the social capital in the areas of education and career development for these young men, right? Are they living in homes or are they living in houses? Because if they're living in houses, then we can start to pinpoint where the issues are. And it's not to blame anybody. It's not to say the founder of the missing black boys is wish-wash. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a crisis going on. You've identified the crisis, but we can't just point and blame. We have to find where the concerns are, the barriers are, but also the moments of maybe being dehumanized, right? Because if we're also aware that a lot of these, many of these parents particularly, are raising their children in houses, then they're also dealing with something too, right? So we can't just jump that and say it's the boys, right? And you can't jump that and say it's the boys who are being led by the boys, because those boys who are leading the boys, it's the blind leading the blind, right? They didn't get there, they weren't born and was like, oh yeah, I'm going to sell dope. That's how it works, right? They're encouraged. You watch Scarface?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know where I'm going with that. you didn't even hesitate. You're like, right? Didn't you finish watching that movie like, I can sell dope.
First you get the money.
You see? Right? You see? Right? I'm sorry, my bad.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Right? You see, you get these influences from different environments, right? So what say these young men? So that's one research I'm working on. You cannot love somebody unless you love yourself unconditionally. You just can't. It's impossible. If you do not love yourself unconditionally, you cannot share love, right? I think, a lot of people with pressures of society, I hear it all the time. Like I'll ask some people in the salon talk, for example, or barbershop talk, or even some conversations, right? Like, how much do you love yourself? That's one question I ask people. And usually it's like, oh, out of 10. I'll say, how much you love yourself out of 10? Some people are like, oh, I love myself a 7. I love myself 8. And then I always say, well, I'm not perfect. And I'm still working on this. And I need to work on this, right? And I said, well, loving yourself and working on yourself are two different things, right? You can love yourself and still work on yourself, right? But people are so fixated on being perfect, right? And when I get that perfection, then I'll love myself, right? But you can't you can't miss the opportunity to love yourself unconditionally and think you're going to meet all these markers, right? Because you're going to be missing a huge part of your humanity, which is appreciation for your own humanity, right? So to answer your question, like how do you then encourage love in a house and turn that into a home? I think it's a bigger project. I really do. I think that's again, understanding the ebbs and flows of what it means to be black, right? Like if you know anything about what it means to be black worldly, and it means non-human, and it remains to be that way. No matter how much times you say black joy, no matter how many times you say black excellence, you're saying non-human excellence, non-human joy. Because worldly, that's what blackness represents. It's always in opposition to whiteness. Always. Right? And until we can socially correct that and restore humanity to black bodies, then we can start having those conversations to fix the problem.
So a new community center won't fix everything.
Never. A new community center, a new acronym, it's humanity. It's the basic thing that we all need is to understand who we are and how to love one another. No matter if you're white, no matter if you're black, no matter what your race, ethnicity is, your gender, sexuality. Loving yourself. And if you don't love yourself, you got to learn how to do it, right? And for the record, I didn't just one day say, hey, I love myself. It took me a while. Like there's been days where I'm like, fuck, I hate myself, right? And a lot of people go through that. But if you're on a group of people, again, social capital, if you're on a group of people that help you feel a sense of belonging, feel a sense of appreciation, then there's more opportunities to love yourself. And then the other project I'm working on is a bigger project. So a lot of the work that I've been doing is in Barbados as well. So tied to understanding the social capital, the performance and performativity of these young black men in Barbados. Gun violence is a huge thing in that country right now. For a very small country of only 280,000 people, there's a shooting every day. Every day, even this morning, I woke up and a news clip was sent to me, and it was someone just shot outside the road, a young black man, right? So the work that I'm proposing, surprise, surprise, is starting a youth employment training program focused on the barbershop as a site for employment. So training these young men from it's 25-week internship where they'll be trained in class for 7 weeks and 18 weeks as an apprentice. And in doing so, we're training using that barbershop talk type dialogue through creating a curriculum out of that, but also creating barbers who are attentive. I don't want to say more, but who are attentive, and appreciation for the clients who they're cutting, to start dialogue and humanizing and paying attention to entry points of like, hey man, you looking a little sad. You good? You all right? What's going on? Talk to me. And one of the things that we want to, whoever cuts your hair, you tend to go back, if they're doing a good job, right? Like every 2 weeks or every month. And you either create a brotherhood or a sisterhood, right, with that person unintentionally, because you're sitting in that chair forever long and it's like, hey, how's it going? How's your day? Hey, remember last time we were talking about the Jets? You're in the Leafs? Like, how did they win that? Like, you get into those conversations with people, unintentionally. You don't even realize you're doing it, right? So the project is using a lot of the work that I've done through the book, but it comes with a research component to evaluate and assess and using a SWOT analysis of the actual project, right? So those are the two biggest projects I'm working on right now. So very fortunate, very happy that I'm able to do it.